I am with the Alaska Wilderness League, and we're here tonight to support the movie Tapped, which is about bottled water, which is a terrible waste, including a terrible waste of oil. And oil drilling is a big threat to my home in Alaska.
Jim Wilfong is a 14th generation New Englander, and he is a native Mainer. Jim was a Maine state legislator for 2 terms. During that time, he served on the Natural Resources Committee. In addition to his work in the legislature, Jim has also been a Assistant Trade Secretary in the second Clinton administration. Jim was also very instrumental in developing and seeing through to its enaction the bottle bill that we have here in Maine, which has done a great deal to help us control the amount of pollution that goes on in this state.
As Herb says, I grew up on a small farm up in the western mountains of Maine, and I got involved in the Maine legislature when I was far younger than I am today. I was 27. And we were involved in the environmental issues of the day, which were clean air, clean water, coastal wetlands, shoreland zoning, the bottle bill, etc. We were busy trying to put laws into place that would not only protect Maine's environment, but help to clean up Maine's environment, because at the time we had some really dirty rivers. Unfortunately, we did not concentrate or think about large-scale extraction of water. I see myself as a citizen who's just trying to take that responsibility seriously. And we got involved in this. I thought it would be a tough fight, and it has been, but we have had some success along the way, including getting many of the environmental protections in the last 3 or 4 years into place. About a year and a half ago, I got a phone call from some people in Los Angeles, and they turned out to be a young group of filmmakers. I think they were all under 32 and under. And they called me, as they were calling groups from around the United States, including McLeod, California, Florida, Michigan, and they called us up here in Maine. And they wanted to talk to us, and so I talked to them about the different things that were going on in Maine. And they decided that they would start their discussions here in Maine, and that they would that Maine would become a central focus of their film. They came up and spent 4 days with us and put this movie together, and I didn't realize at the time the extent that they were, the broad sweeping idea that they had for this movie, which was not just to focus on the water, but to focus on the scarcity of water in some places, the disruption to communities, such as we've experienced here in Maine. And then what happens where they make the bottles that they package this water in? What happens to the people who live there? What kinds of chemicals might be coming out of those plastic bottles? And they took a hard look at that. And then, of course, where does that plastic package wind up in the end? The consistent theme is that really people are second all along the way, if there is a consistent theme. People come second to the needs of large corporations. And that is a very sad thing for me. Leslie and others came to us in about May of 2007 and asked us if we would be willing to talk. And I said, well, what do you mean about talk? I suppose if we're talking about something substantive, then we're willing to talk, but it's got to be something substantive. And they assured us that it was. And then other legislators, we had Phil Bartlett, who was one of the sponsors of this legislation, who is now the majority leader in the Maine Senate. And he was on the Natural Resource Committee at the time. And so we sat down with a very large group of people, including municipal water representatives, private water representatives, rural water representatives, blueberry farmers, potato farmers, a whole host of different folks. And so we sat down and we gave up some things in that particular bill to pass what we did. And here's what we passed. We passed, up until that time, if you had, the only time you had to do an environmental impact statement or a study for major water extraction was if you triggered the Site Location Act. And the Site Location Act was triggered when they built a plant. And so if you triggered the Site Location Act with building Hollis or Poland Spring or now up in Kingfield, then you had to do an environmental impact study on all parts of water extraction. But that was it. If you had a large extraction well in the unorganized territory, you might have to, if LERC decided they wanted you to, you might have to do one there. If you were down here in the municipals or the organized territories, you were not required by DEP to do one at all. And so one of the things that we had as an organizing principle, the group that I put together, H2O for Me, back in whenever it was, 2003, we wanted to protect the environment. That was our primary goal. And our secondary goal was to place the groundwater into the public trust. Because the groundwater, unlike the surface water, is not placed in the public trust. It's because, I mean, tell me how stupid this is. We have one hydrological system and two bodies of law that are governing it. Because we were part of Massachusetts, and in 1641 and 1647, they passed what were known by the Massachusetts General Court. They passed what were known as the colonial ordinances. And the colonial ordinances looked at the common law, and because they were, I mean, it's sort of interesting, but because they had a shallow harbor in Boston, they needed to build long piers out there, out to it. They needed it to be private, and so they took the water, they made the law function not from the high water mark, but to the low water mark. And when they did that, they inadvertently split the hydrological system, and ever since the 1830s, all Supreme Court cases and all of this case history has been going back to those colonial ordinances in 1641. We had all of this case history and no law. And so what we had to do was we tried to place the groundwater into the public trust. And to place it where the surface water is. It's kind of crazy. The water trickles out of the ground, becomes surface water, flows out, it's in the public trust, flows down the streams into a lake, it's in the public trust, flows out of the lake, back into the aquifer, it's no longer in the public trust. That's the way the water law works here in the state. So what we said in this law was that we wanted to have a public process, a really thorough and available public process. And we wanted to place all major extraction wells into the Natural Resource Protection Act, where there would have to be a complete environmental impact study done each and every time they did it. And in addition to that, they would have to monitor those wells, and the data which under site location they give to DEP, but DEP told me at the time we were negotiating this that they couldn't they couldn't review and analyze the data because they didn't have enough people. So we went back and said, look, if you're going to provide this data, then what you must provide is you must pay for the state to hire independent people to look at the data, analyze the data, and make recommendations. And that needs to happen in perpetuity.